When you have time to yourself, time to spend alone with God, you will hear from Him. He'll speak to you through the Word. He'll answer your prayers, and He'll meet you there. And those moments are special. They're precious. They're valuable. But at some point, you need to open your circle and let people in. And when you reestablish those relationships, both positive and negative, you give yourself an opportunity to grow. You can transition from understanding to practice. And that's a big step. Living out a relationship with God in isolation is basically impossible. We need other people to be part of the process. See, loving your neighbor has one big requirement. You need a neighbor, a real person, someone to love with real flaws, an individual who's lived a completely different life than your own. They may not agree with you. They might push your buttons, but you need someone who needs you to show them what Jesus is like, even when it's challenging. Christians need to make that transition from understanding to practice. Bonhoeffer put it like this: faith only becomes faith in the act of obedience. So if you want to grow, you got to get out there, you got to deal with people. Now, in the first 3 chapters of Philippians, we were focused on intellectual and spiritual themes. But now we're transitioning to the practical application of everything we've learned. So you're going to see some major connections with these real-life situations and the mentality that Paul has been promoting. He's been pumping this up like a hype man with the intention of making it practical, of condensing everything down to where we live, to our interactions and our relationships with other Christians. And I want you to remember that even though this was written at a specific time to a specific group of people, it can be applied as a model to your life right now. So let's set this up. Paul loves this church. In chapter 4, verse 1, he calls them brothers and sisters, dear friends. They're besties, okay? They're besties. They were his joy and his crown of victory. So we don't have to question his motives. Paul loved them. He wanted to see them succeed. And I've mentioned this before, but he's been with them since that church started. If we read Acts 16, 12 to 14, we get a first-hand account of their origin story. From there, we travel to Philippi, a Roman colony, and the leading city in that district of Macedonia, and we stayed there for several days. On the Sabbath, we went a little way outside of the city to a riverbank where we thought people would be meeting for prayer, and we sat down to speak with some of the women who had gathered there. One of them was Lydia from Thyatira, a merchant of expensive purple cloth who worshiped God. As she listened to us, the Lord opened her heart and she accepted what Paul was saying. So, from a meeting on the side of a river, how redneck is that? Lydia became a believer and a co-worker with Paul. Her house was where they met, not a sanctuary, a living room. And we can assume that other people followed her lead. If we go to Philippians 4:2, it tells us about 2 more women, 2 more co-workers who had helped Paul establish the church in Philippi, who had their hearts open and were leaders in their community. See, they were established Christians, but at some point, things went sideways. Personalities clashed, words were said, and lines were drawn. We don't know exactly what the issue was here, but based on Paul's reaction, it was probably more personal than theological. And even a small conflict can have big repercussions. It can impact a whole church. You know what our problem is? We focus on the wrong things. We focus on winning the argument, no matter how ridiculous it is. Even if you've gotten so far off track, you can't even remember what you're arguing about anymore. We focus on hypothetical situations. I mean, some people do. I'm not saying you do, but some people focus on hypothetical situations. For some people, their morning shower is like a hypothetical argument simulator where they have all the answers and they always win. See, people focus on the wrong things. In an argument, I think I'm focused on you. You think you're focused on me. In reality, we're just focused on ourselves, and nobody is thinking about how this reflects God's character. So what are we supposed to do about it? The simple answer is this: agree with each other. Paul says to Euodia and Syntyche, please, because you belong to the Lord, settle your disagreement. The actual word he uses here comes from the Greek phroneo, which means to have the same mind. And that should sound familiar. See, this is the part where we go back and connect this real life situation to the themes that we were talking about this whole time. Phroneo is one of Paul's favorite words. He's used it twice already. First, he used it in Philippians 1:27 when he said, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, phroneo, striving side by side, being co-workers together for the faith of the gospel. The second time was in Philippians 2:2-4, complete my joy by being of the same mind, phroneo, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind, phroneo. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to their own interests, but also to the interests of others. What we see in Euodia and Syntyche is an example of two people who love Jesus, who are serving in their church, but they're caught in a situation where they're not looking out for each other. They're inwardly focused and they've forgotten what it's all about: living a life worthy of the gospel. In verse 3, Paul brings in a third party to help them deal with this issue. If you ever find yourself in a disagreement that you just can't seem to solve, it's a great idea to bring in a pastor, bring in a counselor, or bring in a true companion, like it says here, to help you find that resolution. But however you get there, remember, it's not about the argument. How many arguments seem so irrelevant when you change your perspective and start to think about that big picture? It's about the gospel. It's about reflecting God's character. It's about belonging to Christ, and it's about living a worthy life. One mind, one spirit, one purpose.